Good morning.
Morning, Rabbi. How are you?
All right, how's it going?
Going. It's raining here. Hard.
Oh goodness. Okay. Yeah, we got a
It's not lovely weather.
yeah, we were raining. It was raining here pretty hard yesterday.
Yeah.
Um, so we're gonna have we got a little more coming. So yeah,
We're not supposed to get anything from this hurricane, right? That's in Jamaica and Cuba now.
I haven't heard anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm very fortunate in that in Charleston. Um, there is a member of the community, the Jewish community, who comes to the synagogue, the conservative synagogue, quite often, who is a meteorologist.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Now, he's not a TV meteorologist, he's like a
Right.
scientist
Right.
meteorologist.
Right.
And one of the nice things about him is that he, like, every time there is like a weather event potentially in the offing, he always posts on Facebook numerous times, like, and says, okay, here's what I'm getting, here are the chances of X, here are the chances of Y, here's, like, I mean, like, it's the most, it's not only is it very intelligent, but it's also very sober.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
In Because I mean, you watch local news whenever there's a big weather thing, it's like, oh, Snowmageddon, it's like
Yes.
the biggest disaster is coming.
hmm
Stay
Always the
tuned.
worst case scenario.
Even in New Jersey, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, stay tuned, nonstop for our coverage and everything like that. And like, you know, I mean, yes, they are doing a public service, but there is a bit um of hype that goes into it. And the nice thing is that he provides just like these are the odds of this, these are the odds of that. I would be concerned about this. I wouldn't be as concerned about that. I mean, like, just very like
Very,
logical stuff, which when you're dealing with this, that's what you need.
Yeah.
You don't need hysterics.
it's a bonus when you live in an area where these things can happen frequently.
Right.
So,
No question. No question. So yeah, so thankfully, obviously, like, hoping Jamaica and other places are don't get the worst of it. So all right. Well, I appreciate everybody jumping in. Let's let's get into stuff. Okay. All right. Pretty sure we're at, let's see, 97. Okay. We're starting with some fun today.
Belcher yawn, huh? Good luck with that.
Yeah. Okay.
well, I'm definitely guilty of the second thing in there.
Yeah. I think we all are at times. And that's not by the way, that's not to say that, like, oh my gosh, services are so boring. It's more like the idea of you get tired.
Yeah.
We ask a lot of we ask for a lot of people's time when it comes to services. We really do. And I'm not saying, I mean, look, and this is not to say it's bad. This is not, but it's just it the cumulative addition, I mean, the accumulated time that services take, it's a lot of time. So
We're used to it, but I have Christian friends here who say to me, your services, wait, they're how long?
yeah,
Like, what?
yeah,
Especially the high holidays. I mean, they just said they were
yeah.
amazed. Yeah.
I mean, I've had and look, I've had conversations with conservative rabbis, conservative rabbis who are, who do not want to, shorten services unnecessarily.
Right.
But at the same time, they'll say, what are we doing? what are we like? So I mean, like, I think it honestly it motivates me to I try, and not always with absolute success, obviously, but like I try to keep things moving, right? A
Yes, you
prayer,
do.
a prayer ends. Okay, we're on the next one. A prayer ends, what have you. Like, it's I do think that that efficiency, and I wouldn't say, I mean, efficiency, but I wouldn't mean like a ruthless efficiency. I'm not here to be, absolutely, military about the whole thing. But I do think that like lollygagging is also not the greatest virtue when we're asking um of so much of people's time. It's sort of like, it's like if you're watching a sporting event and um you'll see every once in a while that the referees or the umpires or whatever it is, they're gathering up, they're talking something through, and the crowd gets restless. And on one hand, okay, you know what? The officials are just trying to, get it right. Why are you so upset? They're just trying to get it right. But on the other hand, it's like, like this is dead time that we don't need. So anyway, I try to take away the dead time, if you will. So, all right. One should not belch or yawn during the prayers. So we have five different, and like, it's like five CEFI, meaning five different like teachings on this. So it's like so obviously people have thought a lot about the belching and yawning habits of our congregants. And so, by the way, I mean, look, we're human, it happens, but I mean, I will say that I will not name where this place is, which where this was, but there was a minion that a weekday morning service that I would attend with some frequency, in which there was a regular attendee who would belch loudly numerous times during the service. And and I never addressed it because like I didn't want to make him I didn't want to be, I didn't want to like add to any embarrassment. The thing is, he didn't seem that embarrassed. Like he didn't, it's not like he normally, he rarely, if ever, did he say, "Excuse me." It was just like, and so look, maybe he had a condition. I don't know. I just like, okay, okay. But was it distracting? Yeah, it was distracting.
Maybe that's why we're not supposed to eat before morning services on Shabbat.
Maybe. Look, and here I am drinking a soda pop, but like, it's but yeah, but it's still like, and again, like there are certain things that happen beyond a person's control, right? There are certain things that happen beyond a person. Like, I mean, look, I mean, sometimes you'll be in a situation where somebody in the service has, they'll have I hope I'm referring to this right. They'll have like a tick, right? They'll have or they may have, something like Tourette's syndrome, where they make certain noises, you know, out of, but it's beyond their control. Like they, so it's like, so, is it distracting? Yeah. But on the other hand, it's like, okay, if you can't help it. Okay. So anyway, so I think they're going to get into this. One should not belch, i.e., one brings out from his body to his mouth a blowing as a result of one's satiation, nor yawn, the palate of one's jaws opens to bring forth a breath from the mouth. And if one needs to yawn due to a compulsion, one should place one's hand over one's mouth so that its opening will not be seen. I think that's, that's a reasonable thing to say.
That's interesting. In the 16th century already, they were worried about this kind of a courtesy that one, hides one's mouth when one yawns. Very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder if it's, it says that one of the satiation, they give an old French term. I wonder if it is all the practices that one has learned, from the French culture, which these people in Eastern Europe were very much connected to. So at that time,
it is interesting. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think I think it's a valid theory. What I also wonder is, the fact that they're saying Old French. Many of Rashi's commentaries, Rashi was French.
Yes.
And many of Rashi's commentaries will in which he's analyzing a particular word in the Tanakh or the Talmud, and he's like, oh, it's like this word in Old French, this word in that, in that particular language. So there's a part of me that wonders whether people like going to the Old French because that's what Rashi did.
And it must have been something that was done because Martin Buber's grandfather, who was a biblical commentator in Eastern Europe, in Galicia, he would not always know the right French term when he worked on something, but Martin Buber knew Old French, and so he would ask his grandson to help him with the text when he got to something like that.
Wow.
So it was the Old French was very much part of Jewish study and thinking. I'm not sure exactly what the connection is, but definitely it was. This is what we're talking the 19th century, right? And so it definitely was used then.
Interesting. Okay. Wow. No, I hadn't thought of that. That's great.
I didn't know Rashi was French. So
Yeah, he was French. He was. I think we always had fun with this when we learned this. Is that he lived or spent at least some amount of time in his life in the city of Worms.
Yeah.
Which of course, is spelled Worms. It's like he lived in Worms. Why would he live in Worms? When you're 11 years old, you think that's the funniest thing in the world. And then I find this one interesting. This little gloss here, and one should be careful to not place one's hand on one's chin during prayer, for that is the way of haughtiness.
Wow.
Really? Like I'm doing now, yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess it's because I don't know. I would tend to think that doing this, stroking a beard, or in some people's case, an imaginary beard, whether I see sometimes people doing this, even if they don't have facial hair. And it's like, whatever it is. But I always tend to think of that as somebody, deep in thought, as opposed to being egotistical or anything like that. So to me, or at least the expression that I would hear in terms of haughtiness is somebody who's got their nose stuck in the air or something like that. I do wonder. So, and at first I wonder, what does this have to do with, yawning or belching? But I imagine that it's like, all right, you should put your hand over your mouth, right? So in other words, they're saying okay, put your hand over your mouth, but don't transfer it here. Don't transfer it down to the chin.
Yeah, I'm thinking more of that you put your like you sit like this, put your, I don't think you can see this, but you put your head on your hand, you put your elbow on the table and you kind of support your head with your hand. I think that may be, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, like what Janet is doing.
And some people have trouble sitting still, like me, and that sort of keeps me still. Just
It also, I
Right.
would read that as concentration. Like
Yeah.
Janet's like this, she's concentrating, she's paying attention. She's sort of immobilized her head so that her attention is focused.
That's
Yeah.
just the opposite of what they're saying, right? Kind of.
I don't know.
It's I think so. Here's what I would, and look, and maybe they're going to talk about this. I don't know, but I will tell you a story of of the way that there was a dispute between like sort of a long-standing dispute between a congregant and her rabbi. This was not I was not the rabbi in question. This was not me. But my understanding was that she was so upset with the rabbi that she'd be in services on Saturday mornings, and when he would give the sermon, she would stay in her seat but turn her body away from the rabbi and then like place her head on the on her arm,
Sorry.
as a way, and like, I mean, I think the only thing that may have been that would have potentially been ruder, I guess, would have been if she had, like, kind of closed her ears and said, like, I'm not listening, or whatever it is. It
Yeah.
was
Or walked out, right? She could have walked out.
She could have walked out. Honestly, I think walking out would have been nicer.
Mhm.
Because then it like, okay, it's like, all right, they're obviously making a they're making a statement like that, but at least they're gone.
Right.
At least they're not, at least you don't have to like watch them through, so it's like they're trying to listen to the sermon, and then they have this visual of, somebody, turning their heads and basically being like, I will not, I will not, I will not engage. I will not, and
Being dramatic.
yeah, it was rude. It was because, I mean, it was completely intentional. I mean, there was no, I mean, I guess there may be, scenarios where somebody's not listening, but they're dealing with something else that has nothing to do with it, and it really is nothing personal against the rabbi. This was intentional. So, so maybe that's part of the idea that, like, maybe you're not worried about haughtiness toward God, but you're worried about looking haughty in front of other people and upsetting them. Just a guess on that. Okay. All right. Here, this will be fun. It is forbidden for one to spit while praying the Amidah. And if it is impossible for one not to spit, one should absorb into one's clothing in such a way that it is not visible. I guess I would say better to use a handkerchief or a tissue if you have one handy. That would be much better. And if one is sensitive, if one cannot stand to see something disgusting, and one is not able to absorb it into one's clothing, one should cast it behind oneself. In other words, turn your head if you, I mean, like if you have to spit. Um, uh, I mean, other than dealing, feeling sick, like a cold or something like that. Like, I mean, I don't know why one would be compelled to necessarily have to spit. Um, but I do have a story about this. It's not going to get into gross details, but I do have a little story about this in a moment. I do find this next part kind of hilarious. And if it's impossible to cast it behind oneself, one should cast it to one's left, but not to one's right, and all the more so in front of one is prohibited. In other words, okay, like, all right, if you really can't control yourself and you need to emit something like this, you do it to the left and not to the right because of the preferences of the right vis-a-vis the left. And of course, you know, you don't spit on somebody. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious, but like you really don't, like, as if you needed a reminder. But yeah, you don't spit at somebody. Okay. Here's the amusing story. And again, I don't think this one's, so gross. But I don't know if you knew this. The Aleinu prayer, um, in its original text, the sentence there was an extra sentence in the part just before you bow. And the sentence said that all other gods are of nothingness and spit. That was in the original text of the Aleinu. The basic idea is that all other gods are essentially worthless. Which, in the more ecumenical society that we live in today, we took that line out because, we don't want to be insulting to other people's, religious ideas, which is definitely it was the right move to take that away. However, that sentence still lives on in some, certainly not all, but some Orthodox prayer books, including that of Chabad. I'm not saying this to say negative things about Chabad. I'm just saying that in their prayer book, that line is still there in the Aleinu. I heard a story about a Chabad house in which the practice of that Chabad is that when people got to that line in the Aleinu, that the custom was actually to spit on the ground. That was the accepted practice. Might still be at that Chabad house. I'm not sure. Now, so there was a joke made. So this was a Chabad house in Chicago. Now, Chicago has a street, a relatively busy street called Touhy Avenue. It's spelled Touhy. I actually, for a year, lived pretty close to Touhy Avenue. And so one of the people of the Chabad made the joke that in honor of their Chabad, Touhy Avenue should be renamed Aleinu Boulevard. Because what do we do during the Aleinu? We go Touhy. That was the joke. I thought it was amusing, but That's the only that is the extent of which I can speak of spitting during services. It is not something that I would advise, and I would say if you ideally if you do need to do so, the best thing to do is of course, walk out of the sanctuary briefly or what have you. You go into the bathroom, whatever you need to do. Okay. Let's see. So now they're talking about the whole question of, left versus right. I don't think we need to go into that unless you're really hoping to. Okay, so now we're going to get into less hopefully less gross stuff. If a louse bites a person in the middle of praying the Amidah.
Is the louse praying or is the person praying?
I think no, that's funny. Yes. If a louse bites a person in the middle of praying the Amidah, I mean, so basically, like if you get a bug bite or something like that, one should use one's garment to remove it, so that one will not lose one's concentration. But one should not remove it with one's hand in order to, so that your hand doesn't get dirty. And this is specifically at the time of the Amidah. But when not at the time of the Amidah, one may take the louse with one's hand to throw it away in the synagogue. It's pretty specific. I imagine that, look, remember this is, Shulchan Aruch, this is a 16th century document, and therefore, matters of pest control were different, I would say, during that time. Okay. Questions or comments? Not that we. Yeah. So please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Why is it referencing Or Zarua right there? Is it at that point that we're done with the Amidah? Is that?
Oh, excellent question. Or Zarua, I think in this case refers to a commentator who goes by the moniker of Or Zarua.
Okay.
It's not a reference to the prayer Or Zarua. Excellent question. But yeah, no, I'm pretty sure that the Or Zarua was one of those commentaries on Jewish law.
Okay, thank you.
No, absolutely. Okay. So now, and now this isn't a matter of sort of grossness or anything like that. If one's talit slipped off from its place on one's shoulders, one may grab it and return it to its place. But if it fell off entirely, one may not return it and wrap in it again, for that would be an interruption. Now, that's not to say that you can never do it. Like, if your tallis falls off your body, that you can never pick it up. It just means that, like, if it's in the middle of the prayer, wait till you finish the prayer and then pull it back up. I would find that hard to do, honestly. I would find that to be a bit of a challenge. But it's but that's certainly but that is a scenario that happens sometimes. Now, again, all of this has to do with the questions of distraction, right? One who is carrying a load on one's shoulders and the time of praying has arrived. If the load on one's shoulders is less than 4 kavs, which I imagine is a unit of weight, one may leave it behind one. In other words, let it dangle behind one and pray. But if it's 4 kavs or more, one places it on the ground and then prays. So I think this is a matter of, like, all right, if you have a backpack, if the backpack is reasonably light, then yeah, you can pray with the backpack on. But if it's heavy and you're gonna notice it, notice the heaviness of it, then you should put it on the ground first before you pray. Again, so that what you have is fairly logical. The what you have is, not distraction. So I think that's logical. Real quick, I'm going to I'm just going to stop my video for a moment. So because I'm going to move locations in my home when we talk about this, but I'll be back in a second here. Anyway, as I walk from one place to another, are there further questions or thoughts about this?
Because I looked up a Kav, it's approximately 2.6 liters.
Hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Maybe like 10 liters.
Right.
It's like 2.5 gallons. That's a lot. All right.
Yeah, it is kind of a lot. I mean, so like I usually travel with a travel, unless I'm on like a really long trip. Usually when I travel like on an airplane, like I actually was just, a couple days ago. Um, I travel with a travel backpack. Usually I try to limit my baggage to just that. I think my travel backpack, I think holds up to 28 liters. Now, I would imagine that backpacks of modern day are far better made with much better sort of back support than, let's say, hundreds of years ago when, you didn't have sophisticated backpacks and you had essentially like basically literal sacks that you literally, draped over your shoulder.
Yeah, better ergonomics. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's probably uh so yeah, I imagine that, yeah, carrying was it so you said what 2.4 liters? So that's, so
2.6. Yeah.
2.6. So that's like you're carrying, so if it's 4 covs, that's, 10 liters, 10, that's heavy. So it makes sense. Okay. So if we're good, feel free to jump in if we're not. But if we're good, let's see what the next one says. Okay. So now it looks like we're getting into sort of kind of bigger picture questions about having concentration, right? Having kavana. One who prays needs to concentrate on the meaning of the words which one brings forth from one's mouth. One should consider it as if the divine presence is opposite one. In other words, if you're standing literally in front of God, and remove all distracting thoughts from one until one's thought and intention remain purely about one's prayer. Okay. I would say, by the way, that this is the ideal. It often is very difficult to make to actually live up to that ideal in reality. But that's an ideal to strive for. Okay. One should consider it as if one were speaking to before a king of flesh and blood. And when we're organizing one's words beautifully and concentrating on them so as not to stumble, all the more one should do so before the King of Kings, the Holy One who is blessed, who examines all thoughts. Right? If you're going to be present your best self to a head of state, right? You're going to meet the King of England. You want to be, really, you're going to want to present yourself as well as you can. If you're going to do that for a human king, how much more so to God? A great story, which may not have actually taken place, it might be apocryphal, but the story is told that when Yogi Berra, the famous catcher of the New York Yankees, Yogi Berra, who was a devout Catholic, he met one time the Pope, and supposedly when he met the Pope, the first thing that came out of Yogi Berra's mouth was "Hi, Pope." He didn't, I'm sure, mean to be disrespectful, but that probably wouldn't be the first thing you would say, ideally, if you met the Pope or any other, important figure. So we are trying, of course, to raise ourselves toward God to an even higher place. And so did the pious ones, it goes on, and the men of action, who would seclude themselves and concentrate on their prayers until they would transcend their corporeality and strengthen their mental power until nearly arriving at the level of prophecy.
Wow. That's a tall order.
That's a very tall order. And probably, now, by the way, this, this halachic text that we've been using, Shulchan Aruch, it rarely gets so, how should I put it? It's pretty rare that it gets to like such a sort of so kind of philosophical, or just so ethereal in its conversation. It's like
the opposite of not spitting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've come a long way from spitting. That is true. Which is good. I'd rather not be in the spitting part. So okay. And if another thought comes to one in the midst of the prayer, one should be silent until the thought is eliminated. Okay. Sometimes easier said than done, I have to say.
Absolutely.
Easier said than done.
Well, you said be silent, didn't say you couldn't think about it, does it? I mean, don't start babbling off the mouth. That's what comes to mind when you're in the middle of prayer.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, and look, it's so Richard, you and I were talking just before we were meeting right before this class right now, and I know we were talking about some of these things about concentration, right? And we were talking about the idea of that it is I mean, if it's okay, Richard, that I share this.
Sure.
That one of the things we were talking about is just the idea that it's, I think, a very good feature of modern synagogue life that, at least certainly of Hesed Emunah, I feel that we kind of pride ourselves on being friendly and welcoming. So it's okay to say, like, this idea that we should be, complete, like, laser focused. I mean, they're talking about being laser focused here on the prayer experience rather than ever saying hello to people or, greeting people or just being kind and everything like that. Like, I mean, this is one of those times where I feel like what the Shulchan Aruch is doing is talking about an ideal level of concentration. The fact that most of us do not reach this standard to this incredible degree is not the end of the world.
Well, I find in my experience that when I'm up on the bima and I daven, I can only concentrate completely for a very short time. And then something creeps in, and I got to get it out of my head again before and I mean, I fully understand what they're talking about.
Yeah.
The only thing is, if I don't know, I mean, I probably can concentrate seconds rather than minutes.
Hmm.
And then but I really try very hard to completely focus on the verse
Yeah.
when I daven. But and there's nothing I can do about it. It doesn't last, and then I have to get back to it.
That's one of the things about meditation practice is you're
Yes,
taught
exactly.
that thoughts will come into your mind and you acknowledge them. You stop and you say, okay, I'm having this thought. And then you return to your meditation.
That's
But it's just
what
the way
they're
it
saying.
is.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
they're saying here too. Yeah.
So I was watching this video, and I don't know the name of the psychologist who was saying this, but he made a point that maybe I may have, maybe some of you knew this already, or maybe this was sort of intuitive, but I really hadn't thought of it in this way. He asked the question of, why is it that there are so many kids who can focus so much on playing video games for hours on end, and then you can't get those same people to, concentrate on doing their homework? Why is that? And we are tempted to blame that person. We are tempted to say, oh, they're being lazy, they're not interested. And he said, look, maybe some of them are disinterested, but there's a real scientific explanation for this that has nothing to do with the person's motivation. The reason is that with a video game, there is everything you do, there is an immediate consequence, right? You press this, let's say you press this button to go forward. Either, you get a reward, right? You get a coin that gives you points or whatever it is, or the bad guy, hits you and you lose some of your strength. In a video game, like there is this constant feedback. There are constant consequences to everything, every little thing you do. And so therefore you are like, you have this agency that is continuous. When you're doing your homework, let's say you're doing a math problem and you write the answer down, you don't get that immediate consequence. You have to wait until you go to school the next day, you hand in your paper, and then maybe a couple days later you get the paper back and you find out how you did. And I hadn't thought about it in that way, but that really is I think that's a very important challenge that we have when it comes to prayer. Why aren't people more interested in prayer? Well, because where are you necessarily going to find the consequence of your prayer? You might never find out. Or even if you do find out, how can you prove that it's actually the case? In other words, if you say, "Oh, I prayed extra hard today, and when I got home, I found out that I won the lottery," right?
You're not engaging with anything.
Right, you're not engaged with it. It's look, it's like the joke about somebody who say like they go to the Kotel, they go to the Western Wall for the first time, and they pray there, and and then they get home and they're like, wow, what was it like being at the wall at the Kotel? And it's like, well, it was like talking to a wall. Um, so it's like, in other words, where's the feedback? Where's the and this is one of the reasons why it's incredibly challenging to find um uh, to really concentrate on this. I mean, I think that we should be very cognizant of that, and also understand that that is a major factor in why so many people will say services are boring, right? That's a very common thread. And I'm not saying this because I have some solution. I don't have this, an absolute solution to this, but I literally I saw this video yesterday, and I'm really begun to think about it in terms of like, you know, do we, should services be redesigned in a way that offers more immediate feedback, or should we be selling the idea of services as something that doesn't have feedback, but to try to sort of, to sell it on other points? Am I making any sense?
Yes, but when I go to services, I mean, I go for fellowship,
Yeah.
but the biggest thing, I guess, is the services part. It's kind of like you got to pay for the admission for the fellowship.
Mhm.
Is the sermon or the reading from the Torah when it's translated, what actually slows it down. I mean, I'd rather have an hour session with you, and it's easy to just do it sitting here on the computer where it's a class. It's not. You got to go through the other stuff to get the good stuff, which is going to be the class or the educational part. But you can't eliminate these parts out of a service and say, okay, we're just going to do the service, and the rabbi's going to do an hour worth of class. Can you?
Well, I mean, some people do, right? I mean, it's an interesting thought, because I mean, like, so for instance, I mean, I've like my father, who, has a strong Jewish identity, and loves Israel, and I mean, like, he's a very, like, I mean, he's proud to be Jewish, um and he can't possibly, he's bored out of his mind in services when he goes. Like, he's generally, and what he says is that, though, that uh, what helps, right? It helps if the music is engaging, right? He's like, okay, it's like, okay, like, the music is pleasant. Okay, that helps. All right. But also, like you said, Will, right? If the learning, if the teaching, if the discussion is interesting, that can also be a good factor. Okay. Okay. So
Still mostly on the rabbi. I mean, when I was going to J-Corps regularly,
Mhm.
I'd usually go about an hour late, and then it'd be an hour, and I'd hopefully get there for the Torah service. But I was there for like the additional service, and that wasn't really an additional service. That's just a translation.
Sure.
And then you have the oneg after, but you kind of had to at least show up for that much.
Right. Right. And listen, and I told this to Richard, earlier, but like, I mean, sort of the joking statement of, Goldberg goes to synagogue to pray to God. I go to synagogue Goldberg goes to synagogue to talk to God. I go to synagogue to talk to Goldberg. That's a and like you know, it's an understandable reaction, right? And part of the challenge that we have is like how do we make how can prayer be, you know, maximally engaging?
But can you eliminate certain parts of the service and have more parts for the sermon? Or are
So
they all mandatory on Fridays and nights and Saturday mornings? That's mandatory what you do.
That's what the reform movement has done. Pretty much.
yeah, and I would say that like if you compare I mean, we do have like on Saturday mornings, Heskimuna has two different kinds of services. We have sometimes the traditional service and also the contemporary service. I would say that I've only attended one contemporary service thus far. I've only been in town for one at this point, but that service is I would say that does, but if you compare, I would say either of those services to, let's say, a traditional Orthodox service, we already take out a decent amount compared to an Orthodox service. Now, the question of, are we taking out the right amount? Are we taking out too much? Are we taking out too little? I mean, that's those are discussions potentially to be had.
But what I'm asking, can you?
I mean,
what's in the prayer book? That I thought that was set. You had to go through all that.
Well, a lot of people look at it that way, and look. By the way, Will, those are like these. By the way, you're asking a perfectly good question. So I'm sorry. I'm not trying to dance around the answer. Can you, according to this conservative rabbi, to an extent, yes, you can. But there are limits. But I would also say there are limits to which you can.
Well, I think one problem is that if we take too much out and we only focus on the highlights, you don't have time spiritually to transition from one high point to another. If you only do high points, they become diminished. And so I think we need to be very careful what we take out and how much we take out, just for the sake of shortening the service. Now, the spiritual experience may be lost if we take out too much.
Well, Gilda, is that the board or somebody of the synagogue's decision, or is that something the rabbi decides?
No.
I would say,
think.
No, it's okay. So I would say that it is done sort of in tandem with the rabbi, and with Heskimuna has a committee known as the Rabbinic and Religious Services Committee, and the sense is that at the end of the day, the rabbi is the halachic authority, the one who is supposed to make the final call on questions of Jewish law. As I understand it, and Gilya, please feel free to jump in if I'm describing it a little off, but the Rabbi and Rabbinic Services Committee are made up of congregants. It's made up of congregants who is there to talk about what people are looking for in terms of ritual. In terms of rituals, and what people are expecting, and sort of like, and it's, I would say, an advisory committee. But so here's the thing. I'm, yes, I'm given final authority. If I decide with my authority to do something that is strongly objected to, strongly disagree, is strongly, if there is strong disagreement to what I'm doing by RNRS, as we call that committee, then I run the risk of losing my support and general, enthusiasm for what I do and for what the synagogue does. That's the risk I run if I completely ignore the feelings of those in the community. That's the risk I run. I mean, so yeah, could I be, a despot? Could I be somebody who's like, whatever I say goes, and yeah, I mean, I could, but what good does that do? If
Where I
I'm,
was before, I was on the board and on the search committee for rabbi, and I didn't realize it after we got involved in all this. The rabbi is an employee of a congregation.
right,
That's part of the review process, or it gets even more hectic when you're trying to find a new rabbi that trying to work out what you want to do, and is the rabbi willing to do that or not?
yeah, yeah. So I mean, so you have to. I mean, so yeah, so you absolutely have to do this with with great care, and hopefully that move, you know, hopefully that it's a symbiotic process where
Yeah.
wherever the synagogue wants to be, whatever it wants to be, wherever it wants to go, hopefully, hopefully the rabbi is helping to shepherd that process. But if to use that analogy, I mean, if you're a shepherd and if you're just treating the sheep with an iron fist, the sheep's not going to be very happy. And so you want to, it has to be with like kind of a working together to move together.
Or if you're looking for a new rabbi, you got to find one what the board or the committee wants and what the possible candidates are willing to do or not do.
Yeah.
So it's like, trying to pick a dance partner.
Right. Right. So, big questions that I appreciate that we're asking. I do want to respect everybody's time and conclude for the day. But next week, let's go back to it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Have a
This
good- have
one
a
is
good-
still weekly, right?
So weekly and still, for the most part, 11:30. I will say that next Wednesday, I will be, next Wednesday I will be in Knoxville. So if you'd like to come into the synagogue and be in person for that, for the class, you're welcome to do that. I will still have a Zoom option, so you're welcome to do Zoom too, whatever you like.
Okay. Yasher Koach.
Brooke, yeah, all right. See you soon.
thank
All
you
right.
very much.
Take care. Bye, everybody.